So you're looking for a firearm, in particular a pistol, for home protection. What are some things to consider? Well, the first thing that I have to say right off the gate, and I'm guilty of this myself, is that when you're looking at a pistol, it's really easy to look at it from just a point of view of, does it look good? Is it cool looking? Is it awesome? And you kind of skip the whole ergos, is it natural in your hand? Are the ergonomics practical for you? It's not all about just what it looks like. So you really need to get it out and shoot it at a range. Rent the gun if you can before you purchase it, if you have no experience at all with it. Because what I've found out that some of the coolest looking guns are really not the most comfortable or the most natural, at least for me. And so I've kind of had to go through quite a few myself to find the more refined and perfect for me home protection pistol. So ergos, real big one. And the next for me would be trigger pull. My sweet spot is somewhere between 4.5 to 5.5 pounds of pull. You may want a little less or a little more, but for me, if I go any lower than 4.5 pounds, I almost feel a little uncomfortable with it. It's just a little too easy to pull the trigger. And if I go a little over 5.5 pounds, I find that my accuracy starts to suffer. Not a great amount, but enough that I can notice it at 21 feet or further. Now, the next item is sights. And we all have preferences, and you kind of have to have sights in some way, fashion, or form, because you need them to see, where you're going to put that bullet. And you can get night sights, fiber optic sights. They have hybrid sights, so you can kind of have day glow sights with night options. They'll glow at night as well. So those are cool. But for me, in addition to the sights, for a dedicated home protection pistol, you really want to consider a red dot on your firearm. Is it red dot ready though? Is this pistol is it set up that you can put one on there real easy, or would you have to go through a hassle and send it off or go to your local gunsmith? How would you deal with that? And so there's quite a few more options now than there used to be for platforms, and that are red dot ready. So I would highly encourage you to check that particular feature out, and firearms that will give you that capability without a lot of hassle. So even though you may not be into a red dot now, maybe in a few years you'll kind of warm up to it, and you'll be like, man, I wish I had the platform set up so all I had to do was just, this, and this, and it would be that easy, versus having to go through a lot of various laborious process to get it done. The next is a threaded barrel. Now, not everyone is into a sound suppressor. Now, some people call it, silencers. I think the proper term is sound suppressor, but there are people who use them in different contexts. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to call, a device that, brings down the sound level, sound suppressor. So do you need one of those? I say yes, and I'm sure that most people out there do not go through the process to get a sound suppressor. They just say, hey, I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just put some hearing protection on if I have to discharge my weapon in the home for reasons of personal protection, and just go with that. But the reality is that you may not have a lot of time to even wake up, or even, you'd be lucky probably to even retrieve your firearm, much less, go and say, hey, I'm going to put my hearing protection on and all that. That's kind of not so realistic. So if you have a sound suppressor, you're able to obviously protect your hearing and possibly the hearing of others around you. Preserve that hearing, that extra sense there. It can give you a lot of capability. And so you don't want to kind of hee-haw around that. Preserving your hearing is a big deal, especially during a home invasion. It can give you a great advantage. So a sound suppressor, in my opinion, is a must. And I know it's a real hassle to go through the paperwork, and it costs, extra money to get the tax stamp here in America. But if you live in the U.S. and you have that option, take advantage of it. And I do hope in the future we'll get some new laws passed. Good Lord, how long do we have to wait? Get some new laws passed and make it so that we don't have to pay this $200 tax stamp to have the freedom to put a silencer or a sound suppressor on our weapon. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The next thing to consider is to have a rail on your pistol for a light or laser or a light laser combo, or whatever else you can stick on there. That's something to consider, especially if you're talking about a dedicated home protection pistol. We're talking about definitely a light. I think a light is just like standard. You just have to have that to identify threats. If you're into lasers, you can, have that as well. But definitely, have a way to identify threats. That's a big deal. The next is the availability of high capacity magazines. At least you should have the option, that they're made. I wouldn't probably buy a handgun if the handgun only was available in standard capacity magazines. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker, but for a lot of people, but for me, I want to have high capacity. And why not? If it's a dedicated home protection firearm, it's not like you have to carry this around. If it's just going to be sitting and living in a safe or in your nightstand, you have the ability to actually, have a lot of rounds. Why not have the extended mag? So yeah, let's just say, for example, that you have a Glock 19 and that comes standard with a flush fitting 15 round magazine. Well, you can get a Glock 17 mag and get 2 extra rounds. So you can have 17 rounds in there in that mag, or you can go even more. They have 33 round magazines. That might be just a little too much. The gun could be a little too bulky at that point, but you see what I'm saying? You could get a Glock 17 mag with a +2 extension and have 19 rounds. Now that would be pretty realistic. And so that's something that I would really consider, and I would have if I had, like, for example, a Glock 19. Now, the next point of consideration here would be the history of the firearm. Is it been reliable for most people? Does it have a long service life before you have to start replacing parts? Is it easy to use? Is it easy to clean? Can you upgrade parts easily by yourself, or do you have to send it off to someone or go to a gunsmith? And what type of upgrading parts are available at the time of purchase? It's kind of good to know what's out there. And there's a lot of people who are really into doing upgrades. They can't stand just a factory, just bare bones gun. They just need to personalize it. And if that's really important, then you really want to look at what kind of aftermarket support is out there on the market. The next consideration is cost, and of course the cost of accessories, and overall just long-term maintenance. There's some guns that are just so expensive, and that you couldn't even imagine affording the pistol, and if you could afford the pistol, you couldn't afford anything else, like, accessories. So you don't want to get in a situation that, you have just an incredible amount of money, at least for you. And, what that means to you, of course, differs from person to person. But yeah, you don't want some kind of just crazy high-end piece, really, in my opinion, for home protection. You want something that's decent. And I think that somewhere in the ballpark of between $500 and $700 here in the U.S. at least can get you pretty much almost anything you'd want within reason that's like really reliable and that gives you a lot of options. Of course, there's some that are much more expensive, but I think that we're not looking at some type of collectible item here. We're looking at something that's like a utilitarian tool. And so we need to look at that first and foremost. The next consideration is the fit and finish, the overall quality, and the resistance to wear and tear and rust. That's a really big one for some of us. Rust is a major problem. when you own a firearm. There's so many people that I've talked to over the years that have had these really nice handguns, and just because they carried them so much, or just the way that they stored the gun, and they become just like a big piece of rust over time. And it's really sad. So some guns have different finishes than others. You know, some guns are just more prone to rust because of the materials that are used. And so you really want to look into that. And once again, the fit and finish. You know, you don't want a gun that's just real sloppy, or, you know, that doesn't look good, that, you know, it just, once again, goes kind of back to the reliability and the history of the guns that, you know, that you may be looking at. This is something that you kind of have to really do research, you know, but typically within just a few minutes of looking at a gun, you can see if it's well made or not. And especially if you take the slide off and you look underneath and you look for any type of machining marks, that's a really good telltale sign as well, as of how high of a quality is this item. And if you can't really see any machining marks anywhere, inside or out, that's a pretty good indication that this particular firearm is probably good to go. And lastly, what about the company? What about the warranty? What about the reputation, you know, that for that company? And, you know, the resale value too. Let's just say long term, you know, you want to upgrade to something else. Will you be able to get a good amount of your money back? You know, is that going to be a possibility? And so, you know, I think that, you know, these considerations could help you when you're looking for that really special home protection pistol, the one that's really meant for you. And I think it's worth consideration to take some time and not rush yourself in this process. For one, it's because it's not going to be cheap, probably. You know, after you get the gun and accessories and some ammunition and some training, you're talking about possibly several $1,000s, easy. And that's the thing, you know, it's an investment. And so you really want to take it slow. And I would try out, like I said, rent at least a few, maybe a dozen or more handguns to just kind of get a feel. And not just, you know, look at them and say, oh, it looks nice, I want that. But get a feel for it. You know, shoot the gun and see how it handles. You know, is the recoil manageable? Do you feel comfortable with it? Do you feel safe with it? You know, and that's another thing as well. Here in closing, some people, especially when it's a dedicated home protection gun, they want a safety on their firearm. And I can kind of understand that. For me personally, a carry gun should not have a safety. You want to be able to draw and shoot, and just, you know, make sure that you have some type of cover and protection over the trigger at all times when you carry, and you should be good to go. But a home protection gun that's dedicated there, that's not going to be moving anywhere, it's not going to be going anywhere, it's just going to be in that one location, it's just going to be in your home. It kind of makes sense to have a safety. And if you're not into that, that's cool too. But this is kind of one of the only few times that I would say that I would consider a safety on a firearm, especially, you know, a pistol. And of course, it's just mostly personal preference. But it is something that when you're at home, sometimes you let your guard down a little bit. And especially if you have it like in a nightstand and you're kind of, maybe the gun isn't, you know, in a holster. I've seen a lot of people's, you know, nightstand pistol is just laid out or just thrown in a drawer. And if you're one of those people, it would be too easy to accidentally pull that trigger if there's one in the chamber. So I would say, depending on how you are and how you're going to store the firearm, and I would probably at least consider a safety. But maybe you have a different system that doesn't warrant that. So that's up to you. But I hope you enjoyed these 10 things to consider when buying a pistol for home protection. You guys take care. Thanks for checking the video out, and I'll talk to you soon.